Next, we'll talk about electric guitars and bass guitars. Electric guitar amps are relatively straightforward to mic. One of my favorites, and is the classic, tried, tested, and true, is the SM57. Now, there's lots of other great variety of mics that do the job, and do the job quite well. But I still find myself reaching for that 57 sound. It just seems to scream rock to me, which is the sound I want of a nice blazing guitar amp. One of the biggest things when finding the sweet spot on a guitar amp is to make sure that you locate, in the very first place, where the speakers are on your guitar's cabinet. Some have single 12 amps, some have two 12 amps, and like this amp, this is a 410 amplifier. So sticking the mic in the dead center, you're actually be miking a piece of wood, which is not a great sound. So locating your speaker is 101 level. Next, you want to start by finding maybe the sweet spot in the speaker. Now, I tend to find within the subwoofer of the speaker, there's the centerpiece called the cone. Now, the cone on the guitar amp is going to give you the brightest, most defined sound, but it will also lack quite a bit of body. Now, usually in most applications, I find it a little too bright and a little too brittle for my liking. So I start what I call just a little bit off cone. So starting finding the middle of the speaker and then moving, let's say, maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches off to the side. Just try and get that a little bit of both, the best of both worlds in that location. Now, hearing it in your PA with no EQ and straight up is a great place to start finding the sweet spot. Now, again, if you find it's too bright, moving your mic a little bit further off to the side and a little bit further yet until you kind of find that sweet spot. Now, there's a bit of a song and dance because your guitarist's guitar affects the tone, his controls on top will affect the tone, the pedals he's using will affect all the tone. We first got to make sure, obviously, that the tone coming out of the speaker is exactly, what everyone's looking for in the first place before you even put a microphone in its place. But we'll assume that all that's checking out. In a studio application, I also love to actually use my Royer 121 on it as well. It's not uncommon to stick multiple mics on a guitar cab, as each microphone does have its own characteristic and tone to the amp. I often find that the 57 adds a little bit more of a brighter sound, and at times this Royer, when placed on maybe even a different speaker or a different location on the speaker, can just fatten it up. Again, you have to make sure that the mics work in conjunction with each other and at the right placement on the speaker. But as always, you trust your ears and try some things out. In our stage, as maybe most of you will find, guitarists loved and seem to find their tone best when really pushing a guitar amp to its limits. But the reality is that gets quite loud. And so we've built a couple of amp ISO booths. So basically what we do is we stick our amps in a remote location that's a little bit more sound isolated, and we're able to use these. These are radial SGI boxes, which allow you to deliver the signal of a guitar to the guitar amp without any signal loss, up to about 300 feet via XLR cables. They're a real handy tool to have, and if you find yourself having noise issues on your stage or being able to control those rowdy electric players, this is a great place to do that. Even if you have a spot that's backstage or slightly off stage, you can use these boxes to drive your guitar amps further away and keeping your sound volume as low as possible. Let's also talk about bass guitars. 9 times out of 10, the bassist is going to show up with just their bass and plug directly into your PA. No amp required. In order to do that, we're going to plug them into a nice DI box. Now, I reach for a passive DI box wherever possible because I just tend to like the sound and feel that that represents a bassist's true tone coming off their bass the best way possible into your PA. Now, should your bassist show up with an amp, you can also decide to take a feed off of that amp as well. Now, sticking up a microphone in front of the speaker would have the same principles or similar principles to miking a guitar amp. I tend to reach for larger diaphragm dynamic mics when miking a bass amp, as we're outputting low frequency signal and want to be able to capture that sound to its fullest. So any type of mic that you would typically use on your kick drum would also be definitely suitable for a bass amp.